Hello there, Guthrie here. I'm talking about behavioral economics, and today's topic is crime and punishment, or maybe more appropriately, cooperation and punishment. Throughout a lot of my posts and a lot of my videos, one of the themes that I really like talking about is how to build societies of trust. And by society, I don't just mean, our society, but also groups, small business, teamwork, bonding. What creates the ability to have trust in a group? And you would think that it has to do with altruism, but it doesn't. What's really important is being able to punish outliers and being able to have consistent punishment across anyone. If there are people who are above the law, that erodes trust in a group or an organization. So in the paper, which you should totally read, I have a really long mind journey where I map out a bunch of stuff, and it's really great. So you can read it. It's a little long, I think, for this video, so I'm trying to keep this tight. But you should definitely read the full post about this one. So there's a paper I want to talk about called "Cooperation and Punishment in Public Goods Experiments" by Fair and Goucher, and basically they set up this game, and the game had a bunch of people come together with a mini society. It was 10 turns long, right? So there was some history involved, right? So if someone acted out, you could punish them. Every round, each person was given 20 tokens, is what they were called, and you could keep the tokens to yourself or give them to the group project. Now, the way the math worked out is the more coins that went to the project at the end of the 10 turns, everything was split equally amongst all the players, and there was a multiplier effect. So think of this as you're giving to the group, and then it grow. You help plant the trees, and the trees grow, and then the community harvests the trees, and everyone enjoys the fruits of the bounty. So there's a big incentive for everyone to put the goods, put their tokens in to the group. However, there's also an incentive to keep all the tokens. The ideal strategy would be for me to keep all the tokens each round, and for all of you to put your tokens into the center, and then I get my cut of the tokens, right? So there is a personal incentive. So while there's an incentive to put the tokens in, there's a personal incentive to keep all the tokens to myself. So the question is, how will people react? And the evidence was very, very strong. So the average contribution rate when there was not punishment, again, you get 20 tokens. So the average contribution rate when there was no punishment was somewhere in the realm of 2 to 4 tokens. So people were keeping, on average, 16 for themselves and contributing 2 to 4. But when there was a mechanism to punish people who were not following along, if you kept all 20 of your tokens, you were going to get punished. And the way the punishment worked was very simple. If someone wanted to punish you, they give you a punishment point, and for every punishment point you get, you got a negative 10% of your tokens for that turn. So let's say I kept all 20, but I was given 5 punishment points. That's 50%. That means I only get to keep 10 tokens. So it really is pretty harsh if your members decide to punish you, if a lot of them say, we're grouping up and ganging up on you. So when there was punishment, the average contribution to the group project exploded from like 2 to 4 tokens to 12 to 14. That's a huge jump. And in other rounds, and there's a bunch of different studies, and I'm gonna skip through all the important ones. Even sometimes when they had partners, or when they played multiple games in succession, the average contribution rate with punishment would be as high as 18. So once people developed a society and they knew what was going on, and they became societal norms, even in this little group that was coming together, you could get almost 100%, I mean, call it, 90% cooperation rate. Now, that is really, really powerful. And I think this study is really, really, really great. Now, what's interesting is, when do people decide to punish? So the magic number, it turns out, has nothing to do with how much you give to the project. It actually has to do with how much you deviated from the average contribution. So if you were in a group that was particularly generous, if you kept any to yourself, you were going to get punished. Whereas there were other groups where a little mini society developed where you gave most of your coins to the center, but maybe you kept a couple to yourself. Depending on how many you tried to freeload, that's how many punishment points you received. So there's all sorts of interesting things to be learned from this, and I'm going to jump straight to the summaries. And again, I encourage you to read the paper. It is a kind of a complex game, so I didn't want to get too much into the details. So when it comes to strangers, not playing along is bad. We love to punish strangers. So strangers, again, the first, they had rounds where you'd only play one time. So you are playing with strangers. But it's 10 turns, but it's only one game. So at a certain point, there is a leveling off with strangers. And that's the fascinating point. So the punishments were generally a little higher, but once you got to the severe punishers, the severe outliers, people who were keeping all the coins to themselves, the punishments kind of leveled off. So, the thought is if you're working with strangers, maybe it's that people don't trust you, and so they assume that you're going to be selfish. And then if you're selfish, they're like, okay, we're going to punish you. But whether you are a little selfish or a lot selfish, it's the same to people. So when it comes to strangers, not playing along is bad, right? If you don't play along, you will get punished. But at a certain point, it levels off. So if you're going to freeload, right, and we all know what freeloading is, right? Tragedy of the commons. Everyone's contributing, but I'm not. I'm just going to steal from the public. I'm going to take everyone else's bounty. If you are going to freeload either small enough to get away with it. And, you take a little bit here. People are like, yeah, you shouldn't do that. You take a little bit, right? You go right up to that line, but not before people punish you. Or you go big. You take it. You get you do it all, and then you accept your punishment. But by going big, you've actually made enough where, okay, you punished me, but whatever. It's a slap on the wrist. So maybe the real world example is a big international corporation who goes to an underdeveloped country and is like strip mining all the resources. Okay. So yeah, eventually maybe they get in trouble and they say, oh, we're sorry. And they give their $5 million to the environmental fund of the country. Right. But they've already done all this strip mining and they've made these huge profits. So they went big because they're a stranger. Here's the different thing though. If you're freeloading or stealing from people not with strangers, but if you're already in a group and you're freeloading, the harshness of the punishment knows no limit. People, maybe people assume that strangers don't understand the cultural norms, and you're an international company, you didn't really know what you were doing was wrong, or if you did, you didn't understand how people get punished, so we're going to punish you, but it maybe won't be that bad. But if you should have known better. People will punish without end. They will absolutely punish more harshly for people in their group and who knows what the societal norms are. So, the worst punishments, again, this big takeaway, the worst punishments are reserved for people who know the rules and ignore them. And I find that very, very fascinating. I want to quote here from the paper. The more an individual negatively deviates from the contribution of the other group members, the heavier the punishment. So again, if you're in a group and you're trying to make a decision and you want to stand out for whatever reason, you need to figure out what everyone else thinks is the average thought and then jump beyond it. So if you're trying to stand out in your own company or organization, you need to figure out what the groupthink is, and what the average kind of some people think it's this, some people think it's this, and if you really want to stand out, you got to explode past it and go big. And conversely, if you want to get away with stuff, you just gotta figure out what society feels is acceptable, and then just kind of hover at that little bubble. So, for example, I have here a tech company's computer privacy policy. So Americans believe that they don't have any privacy policies. So if you're a new company looking to maximize your profit, you shouldn't have any privacy policies because everyone kind of assumes that you don't anyways, and everyone's going to get punished. But if they just see you as another big bad evil company, of course they don't protect your privacy. If you actually don't, you may be punished, but you may not be. So that's kind of where you should be. Just don't be the worst unless you're with strangers, and then you can be the worst. So it's an interesting question to make, especially in light of Facebook, I guess, collectively being punished perhaps by society for messing up with their privacy settings. But there's potentially an economic value argument of, hey, go big, go home with strangers, or if you're with other people, just try to keep, just like it's like the joke, like how fast do you have to run to escape a bear that's trying to eat you? You only need to run faster than the person next to you, right? So like, right? So it's like, as long as you're not the worst, you'll be fine, and everyone will ignore you. Whether that's fair or not, that's just how it goes. So if you look at, again, Facebook's a great example. All kinds of companies do horrible things with your privacy, but some, society gloms onto one that's maybe particularly bad, and then everyone else can just skate underneath that stock free. There's also a lot of good arguments to be made for the criminal justice system and how it's inefficient, and sports. One other thing I do want to say, and I mentioned this before, not only though, if you want to build a community of trust and you want to build a community that works well together, the punishment has to be very consistent. It has to be, if I A, then I'm punished B. If there is inconsistency, then people will ignore the punishment, or people will ignore the thing you are trying to avoid. So I have a perfect example in sports. If you goaltend, which is in basketball, right? So in the NBA, you shoot up a shot. If it bounces off the backboard and is about to go in, and you swat it away, it's a goaltend. You can't goaltend. Also, if it's about to enter the cylinder, downward trajectory, I don't need to explain it. But basically, they always call a goaltend. Like 95% of the time, if they see it, they'll call it. And so no one goaltends, because they know if they do, they'll be punished, and it's pretty valuable to get a goaltend called in your favor. Conversely, refs just do not call traveling. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It's pretty intermittent. If you travel, it's a loss of possession, which is worth like about 1.1 points in the NBA. So that's actually pretty valuable. You really don't want to travel, and yet people travel all the time because it's called inconsistently. And so what's really important is to have that consistent punishment if you want to develop a culture where people don't steal from the collective, or people don't do the bad behavior. It has to be, I do it, anyone, no one's above the law, is punished in a consistent way. And that's how you build real communities of trust. So, you can take your own analogies about Hitler and appeasement, right? Where you did something, we're not going to punish you, or maybe we'll punish you now, I don't know, right? And so then the behavior continues. So again, if you're trying to build a good team, I have all kinds of thoughts about the best way to build a team and a community of trust. I think this is a really good research start. I encourage you, again, to read that paper because it's probably better and more succinct than I described it. But I hope that helps. I hope you try it. Let me know if you've experienced any of this in your own teams or companies. And I hope you have a great week. Thank you.